Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajahat Ali for the Left Hook Substack, where I invite a subject matter expert who's far smarter than me to break down one or more than one big question in 30 minutes or less. And today, I'm so pleased to have Professor Noliwe Rooks. She is what the kids call a really big deal. She is the chair of the Department of Africana Studies at Brown University. Yes, folks, an Ivy League. And she is the author of a book that just came out in March, sadly, very prescient, Integrated: How American Schools Have Failed Black Children. And I'm bringing here today on the heel of so much terrible news. Oh, you know, that the Trump administration wants to rename certain bases, but just not rename them. Oh, rename them after Confederate soldiers, and how the worst people on earth are failing up, but the best, most qualified people, especially if they're women or black, are being excised as being DI hires. How books written by people who look like me and Professor Brooks are being removed, but for some strange reason, they have Hitler's book there on the military bases, and how the attack on schools, and specifically the attack on integration, ever since Brown versus Board of Education, remains the focal point of the culture wars. It's built upon all of this. So the big question I have, and it might be a bold, if you will, assumption, is how the Trump administration is going for resegregation. And I ask you, Professor Rooks, am I out of pocket with that statement?
Thank you so much. That's such a big mouthful of having to think about all of those things happening in the same moment. Um, you are not out of pocket. It is, and I don't even think that we're at a moment where you're having to do a lot of analysis, searching, sleuthing to connect dots. Here with this administration, they came in the door declaring their intentions. And so for their first moves to be against the Department of Education, specifically, they want to dismantle it, but specifically get rid of civil rights divisions, specifically get rid of the funding that supports poor minority people of color. And then start saying to struggling school districts all over the country, many of which have been underfunded for quite some time, that unless you get rid of something amorphous called DEI with no real explanation about what they mean, and increasingly it just looks like anything that talks about equity, race, racism, Black people, immigration, things we don't like, to get rid of everything that protects and teaches the aspect of democracy in American culture that makes clear that education plays a role in citizenship, plays a role, is a defining feature fought for by this nation, that we need to get rid of all of that, all of the laws,
Mm,
all of the supports,
mm,
all of the offices that actually ensure that equity can exist. Uh, and aggressively, then we've seen get rid of books that they don't like. Just start firing generals and librarians of Congress. And but the reason given is that they support something called DEI with no real explanation of what that means. So what we're left to understand is Black people, because the attack and the assault, while I think it expands beyond just Black people, it is starting with
yeah.
Black people, are being purged from the federal government. And the work and laws that were fought for in the 60s and 70s are being rolled back. So this is absolutely a moment of resegregation. And I think that, like, like I started, they've told us as much. They're just they're not even giving the lip service that you sometimes hear about. Of course, we support a diverse society.
Nope.
Of course, we believe everyone is equal, but they're not even doing that. They're just kind of like, get out.
And, speaking about that, as we're recording this on Thursday, this is a quote from Donald Trump while he made his just obscene speech politicizing the military at Fort Bragg, curating the audience
Mhm.
to have fit, not fat Trump supporters, right? He
Mhm.
said, quote, "We're also going to be restoring the names to Fort Pickett, Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Rucker, Fort Polk, Fort AP Hill, and Fort Robert E. Lee. We won a lot of battles out of those forts. No time to change. And I'm superstitious, you know. I like to keep it going. Can you
I
tell
have
people?
never heard this exact Trump impersonation, but well done you.
Can you tell folks what those names are? Who they represent? Those names?
Yeah, let me tell you. So he was at Fort Bragg, and to take a little bit of a jog to get where we're going, he was at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. I'm from California. There's also a Fort Bragg in Northern California. Uh, and not too long ago, in Northern California, up near Humboldt County, up in a very liberal Marin, Mendocino, like these towns that are known for really liberal kind of liberal progressive hippie
A lot of
sensibility.
weed.
A lot of weed up there. uh, were in a pitched battle about changing the name Fort Bragg up there, and they kept pointing to North Carolina and saying, "Look how they lost the battle in North Carolina. We had to get rid of Fort Bragg. We had to get rid of Bragg, whose first name I'm not going to remember, but he was a general from." That was a part of the Confederate States of America, as many of the military entities that get named after people. We're talking Confederate soldiers. I mean, think about this: that people who were charged with and found to be traitors against the United States.
Yep.
Um, they declared war on the federal government.
Yep.
Blood was spilled, millions of bodies, are being buried. There's a resolve to the war. These people are branded traitors. And then there was a big fight again in the 1920s about we want to name everything after the Confederate soldiers that are, traitors. And now we're back there again. So there's many of these places that he is literally saying, let's get back there. Let's Robert E. Lee. Let's bring back the president of the Confederacy, the general that is known as crafting the war plan to keep Black people enslaved and to keep the nation engaged in slavery as an economic engine for the nation. Let's bring that back. It leads us to just sort of wonder, though, what are we commemorating exactly?
Mm.
What is it? What aspects of who they were besides military people? Because there are lots of military people you can name things after. And at the same time that you see, let's bring back Robert E. Lee. You're also seeing let's get rid of things named after John Lewis, warships named after Harriet Tubman, John Lewis, other commemorations having to do with military service that Black people engaged in and or heroic or courageous service that the nation has honored for quite some time. At the time that you want to bring back the leaders of the Confederacy, you want to strip people who are Black of the recognitions that they have received also for their service to the nation and to the country.
Yeah, because when black folks do it, and it's black, it always starts with black,
It
and
is.
recently it's become transgender.
Mm,
I'm Muslim. It was Muslim. Then it's
mhm.
immigrants right now with Stephen Miller, but it always starts with black. Let's be clear here. And I don't know if you saw this quote from the Vice President J.D. Vance. I have to ask you about this because it's all connected. This is J.D. Vance in an interview, I believe, with Theo Vaughn. Actually, it could be probably someone else, but here's what he said just recently, June 11th. I feel like something happened like 10 years ago where it's like you have to think that every single person that who fought for the Confederate side was an evil person. I just think that's so stupid. Your response, Professor.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. It puts you in the mind. It's hard to not think about his boss in Charlottesville some years ago when Nazis and the Klan were marching through the street with torches and shouts declaring their racist and anti-Semitic intentions, their fears of white replacement. And people are harmed. Cars are driving into protesters. It's not a peaceful march. And that during his first term, the president said there are fine people on both sides.
I,
And And you're trying to figure out at the moment, like, well, in the abstract, of course, people have within them the capacity for good and evil. People can be a lot of things. But in this moment that we're talking about, that we're looking at, there's one group marching with torches. There's one group saying, we want a white homeland. We don't believe in values and about equality. And these are the people you want to say there's good people on both sides. JD Vance's comment makes me think of that in the same way. To say, let's go through history and find the people that fought against the federal government,
Yep.
against the nation, and lost, fought and lost. Were
Yeah, that's the worst. But they're not just racist traitors; they're also losers.
losers.
So I mean, can you imagine? I always joke when people say, "Prove to me white privilege exists." And I'm like, "This is proof of white privilege." Can you imagine what I would have to do to get a statue or school named after me if I was a racist slaver traitor who also lost the war? Like, if they won, I'd get it, but they all lost,
They lost.
Professor.
They lost. These are the people JD Vance would have us comb through history with no conversation. So here, that same week that this statement was made, there was at the Smithsonian
Yeah,
a meeting. I believe it was earlier this week. We're in the middle of June right now. I don't know when this is going to air,
it's
but it
gonna air
was
just or in the weekend, 2 days.
okay. So yeah, it was this past week. There was a meeting at the Smithsonian that JD Vance is now on the board of the Smithsonian, um, and for the first time. And part of the resolve from this meeting was that Lonnie Bunch, the head of the Smithsonian, was going to go through all of the collections there at all 20, was it 22 museums plus the zoo, and make sure that they are telling the version of America that Donald Trump and JD Vance believe we should be telling. Because we're not saying, hey, let's start a period where we think about, do we want to have a couple of Confederate soldiers in there and talk about how they were great fathers, how they played the banjo? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, do we
Their
want
wives made
to?
great apple pie. They
There
went
was
to
good
church.
pie, and one time they gave a quarter to a begging person. I mean, sure. Let's go through and find those moments. Is that what we want to do? Is that what balance looks like? And add to, or do we need to purge? What they decided is to before we can determine what is untrue in the Smithsonian, what is untrue about what is being commemorated about women and Jewish people and Black people and military history and aviation and all of the things, natural history, all of the things that the Smithsonian is a part of. We need to first purge what
There you
we
go.
don't like. And it's that idea that it's not a negotiation. It's not a maybe we went too far, maybe we didn't. What the it is, I don't know. It's a I don't like what you did, get rid of it and replace it with something else. So at the time that we're hearing Vice President Vance talk about, let's go find one or two. Let's find some good qualities about the Confederate people. He's on a board that is now has determined that Lonnie Bunch has got to. He has 3 months, or I think now he has to do it immediately. He wanted some months, the way it's reported, assuming the reporting is correct, is the only source of information I have. That he wanted 3 months to be deliberate, take some time, figure out how we go about this, and the board. Under pressure from Vice President Vance, decided no, this all had to start immediately. So all of this idea, this tussle over history, how you tell it, who people were, that there are two sides, that we have to be balanced. I'm not saying there aren't sides. I'm not saying that balance is poor, but there have to be some fundamental pieces that we think are not open for debate and discussion. Like, if you have been found to be a traitor, if you have been found to take up arms against the lawfully elected government, you have spilled blood because
Mm.
you disagree with what the authority that your state said they were going to pay some attention to, um, we should all be able to agree that that's bad.
Yeah.
That we
Yes.
don't think that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And we don't want to read that there's not sides. Traders don't like let's have sides to the Judas. Judas was a fine man before before Christians decided that he wasn't. Like,
And again, the fact that throughout US history, the need to whitewash, sane wash, sanitize, praise these slavers, these racists, these men who chose to secede, these men who chose to be traitors, these men who chose to pick up
and
arms
lost,
and
as you
lost,
said, and then lost.
and they lost, and now we have monuments, but also the fact that I think what gets lost is the core of it is they were willing to die to enslave Black people. They were willing to turn on their fellow countrymen to enslave Black people, no matter how much you cut it. Robert Lee, he read some good books. Oh, he's nice to his wife. I don't care, right? That type of cruelty that is whitewashed. And then you see the January 6th violent insurrectionists. Oh, they were misled. Oh, they're good people. And the fact that all of them are pardoned. And now you have the national.
Or they were just tourists. Like there was one period that there was no we don't know what that was. There was fake. AI made those images. They were just there looking at statues.
But it's the myth. The first and foremost is the myth, right? That you have to erase history, right? I'm rereading 1984 for no reason, and on page 80, if I recall, that famous quote shows up where it says the final most essential command of Big Brother was you don't believe the evidence of your eyes and your ears. And that erasure of history, the rewriting of history, the sane washing of U.S. history to remove the cruelty, right? That's been part and parcel since the Civil War. But also, I think it goes back to education, which you have spent your life talking about, and this attack on the undoing of Brown versus Board. Because can you explain to folks why Brown versus Board? It always goes back to Brown versus Board.
So yeah, it's Brown v. Board is such an interesting moment, I think, in US's political and cultural history, because there's a whole narrative and a whole way you can understand it as an unqualified success, as a moment where there were no dissenting views, the way that it sometimes is taught, the way that we commemorate it, the way that we remember it. There was all this resistance to the idea of Black people in schools with white people, or integration, or not having forced segregation. There was all of this resistance to that. But once the Supreme Court, once the law said that this is what it had to be, the way often we teach and receive that is it was great. One of the things that broke Thurgood Marshall's heart, reportedly, after he was the lawyer that argued Brown in the Supreme Court, is decided in 1954. He'd been working on up to it since the 40s, but it was actually decided in 1954. And he said that though he was in conversation and letters and strategies, it's the reason we need to go for segregation, the reason civil rights needs to hinge on segregation, is because if the Supreme Court tells white people that Black children belong in schools, that it is illegal, it is a wrong, it's immoral, it's unconstitutional. We are a nation of laws, and if the Supreme Court says this is unconstitutional, there may be whinging, there may be complaining, but people will obey because we are fundamentally a nation of laws who abide by laws. And the breaking of his heart was watching decade after decade, before he's on the Supreme Court and after, as the very body that we celebrated as bringing forward this moment of multiracial democracy, of citizenship, actually as a workable construct for everyone. It was constantly chipped away at, constantly not enforced, constantly people came up with workarounds, and it was because fundamentally no one asked the majority of white people if they wanted Black people to be integrated with them. They did not. This, as far as people in the South, at least, who were vocal in explaining their concerns, as well as people, leaders in the North. The Supreme Court had gone completely rogue, had ridden over their rights to be separate, to decide what kind of education their children should have. Many people actually wanted their children to have an all-white education. They didn't see what the
Yep.
problem was.
Yep.
Many people did not want to have black people in their schools, and certainly not in the classrooms
Mm.
that their children were in. If they have to be in the schools, put them in some whole other classes, so our kids don't have to be a part of it. They fundamentally didn't think that white teachers should teach black children, and so this moment is where the law gets out ahead of, and I'm not saying the law should have done anything different than what it did, but there wasn't a lot of attention paid in the midst of the celebration of that ruling, to the pitched and marked resistance, so that a few years later you have two-thirds of the sitting members of the Congress of the United States sign on to something they call a manifesto,
Mm.
that is arguing for massive resistance against Brown v. Board. You have sitting governors in 13 states
Mm.
that say, though the Supreme Court has said, this is, the law of the land, I pledge to you, if you vote for me, I will undermine it at every turn. Certainly, the governor of Virginia, he was out in front of everybody else, and he was like, I'll close schools before I will let black people. Uh,
Loudoun County, the last county here to desegregate, and folks, connecting the dots. Where did the attack on DEI and transgender students actually culminate? Right here. The test case was Loudoun County 4 years ago.
yeah.
You got to take that through line, right?
Yes. All many, if you so Brown v. Board is five cases from different parts. They're all in the South, except for Topeka, Kansas, which is still anyway, still a slave-holding state. However, it's five states, and if you look at the state of education and integration in the states that were in Washington, D.C., so in the district and the four states that these cases came from, the fight was most vicious there. Like, think about it. You have this moment of ascendancy where, yes, there's almost like when Obama got elected, right? People were kind of like, that we have overcome. It
Yeah.
is clearly the end of, entrenched racism, and because you don't get a black man as president without the thinking went, without these things. Other people were kind of like, yeah, wait till the backlash. But
Yep.
and it's a similar thing with Brown v. Board. You have everyone saying it's a moment. This is wow. We'll never go back. We've achieved something. And they ignored the backlash. And the backlash is something that we're still dealing with. What parents and politicians and educators believe, one, that nobody had asked them anything. We don't like, they really, what about our rights? How is it that the rights of these people are superseding our rights, which
I
is
mean,
a moment we've
same
come
thing we
back
see in
to.
2024. Parents' rights, parents' choice.
It's the same, but you're also just in kind of general with the attack on DEI and higher education in particular. A lot of it is you've let in too many people who aren't white or
Mm.
aren't meritorious, or you
Mm.
started to give seats to people we don't want to see, and those people are always black, brown, and poor. Like
Always.
they're never like, or immigrants, or they're never like the middle class white. Too many Long Island lacrosse playing white men. There are too many of them. Stop it. It's always these other groups, and it's the same thing. They're taking something from us. We didn't want this. It's not fair to us. We feel like we're outside. That narrative starts with Brown v. Board. That narrative about the pie not being enough for everyone, that there have to be winners and losers,
Mm.
and that black people, in particular, because Brown v. Board really is in the South about a black-white divide, although since it has expanded to exclude others, but that black people are fundamentally going to bring in narratives, ways of being, culture, that will make us feel like we're bad people, like we did something wrong, like we're stupid, like we should be guilty. And we don't want that. So the fight over textbooks coming out of Reconstruction, during the Reconstruction period, you had people coming up with all kinds of curriculum that was trying to expand the idea of what America was and had been. With the levels of sophistication that we did later, but still, just sort of like there were indigenous people in the U.S. Let's teach that. There were, just different, different
Expanding the
kinds.
narrative, stretching it to make it more realistic and accurate and whole and representative,
Yes, yes.
correcting the record, replacing the myths with facts.
Yes,
And some of
that
those
started
facts are
then.
uncomfortable facts.
And it was the battle then over textbooks in coming out of after Brown v. Board really is an underexplored moment that is much like this one, where people were in a pitched battle. We may have to have you in our schools, but we don't have to talk about you all as anything other than slaves
Mm.
who were happy to be who were longing perhaps for a return to the comfort of a time when you didn't have to think about where your food was coming from, what kind of jobs you needed to have. You didn't have to worry about education. You could just be slaves and do work and be happy. And you find a return. I don't know what the return is that we're looking at here, because right now we're just at the purge part. So, what the crafting of the narrative of America that's going to come in the aftermath of this, I'm not exactly sure what the points will be. But it's clear that after the purge, after we got to get rid of all of these figures, all of these people um, who seem to make America feel shame for something that it did, because you had to have a Harriet Tubman lead slaves from slavery to freedom because she had to do that. The problem is that if we don't talk about her, if we take her out, then we don't have to talk about people trying to escape enslavement, because we want you to think people were perfectly fine and happy, and it's just propaganda that made them.
And to see how things connect, right? That feeling that the advancement of Black people in particular, but any marginalized groups, comes at the expense of
Yes.
whiteness. You see that in 1915 movie Birth of a Nation,
Yes.
which was a white nationalist dream, fever
Yes.
dream,
Yes.
that led to folks speaking about the power of culture and narratives and storytelling. 1915's Birth of a Nation literally led to the revival of the KKK. You saw it, Brown versus Board of Education, where the National Guard was unleashed by Dwight Eisenhower to protect Black girls, simply to go to school in Arkansas.
Mhm.
You saw
Mhm.
white neighborhoods literally willing to drain the pool instead of having Black kids swim with them.
Exactly.
And now you see literally America, people willing to destroy the country just because of the sin of Obama becoming president. And now they have the world's most corrupt vulgarian in charge who's destroying this country from within. Speaking about Trump, he now has the power. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have media, they have the Supreme Court, and the dog whistles are gone. Like you said,
Mhm.
Professor Rooks, there's no more dog whistles. There's no more, like as Lee Atwater said in in the early '80s, that famous quote, "Oh, you can no longer say the N word, N word, N word, so you have to say like busing rights and welfare queens." They don't have to say that anymore.
Right.
And so I ask you, with power that they have now, and with Stephen Miller and others, how are they using the government and the powers at their disposal to resegregate?
Yeah, I mean, the two things, the two policies, the two moments that literally lead to a Black middle class that move the needle in ways that are appreciable. It is employed when the federal government it is desegregated, so Black people can work for the federal government.
Mm,
Truman desegregates the military. Um, and then in 65, you have Johnson, who or 64, Johnson, uh, who does the executive order for affirmative action. So those two moments, the 40s and the 60s,
mm.
and they're both policies. One, the desegregation of the federal government, and the uh, oh God, how did I just forget what the other one was?
60s, you said 40s and 60s, civil rights.
But yeah,
Johnson.
and the 60s. Oh, right. Okay, got it. So the things that really lead to a Black middle class are affirmative action and schools opening up. So let's forget Truman for a moment. um, because with affirmative action in the federal government and employment in general, there was recourse when qualified Black people were turned down for
Mm.
jobs, were not able to get into the federal government for employment with benefits, pensions, longevity, guaranteed kinds of pay. Just that you have an influx of people considered middle class because now Black people can work for the federal government. The post office was particularly popular. The other thing that comes at the same time, Johnson was also all about the Pell Grants, the 1965 Higher Education Act, that's
Mm.
tying ideas about opening up the country to schools, to women, people of color. They'd already done veterans a little bit before, the Black people were not included. But a lot of what Johnson was tying federal funding to was you have to let in more people who have not generally had access, and you universities and colleges will have less access to federal money if you don't let them in.
Yep.
Those two moments, moving the needle around work, just taking the white supremacy out of the ability of Black people to work, not changing anything else, but just telling that these institutions and employers, there's another set of eyes looking. So if you have qualified Black people and you're not even interviewing them, you're giving them absolutely no opportunity to win that job. There's a recourse in this Office of Civil Rights in the Justice Department. You will have to face the federal government. That scared people enough into opening up there. And then with colleges and universities, the whole zeitgeist of the time from Johnson's administration following Kennedy's murder really was, we have to open up. Brown v. Board needs to happen in higher education. And that opening up in higher education also led to a growth of educated Black people,
Mm.
people able to assume jobs in corporate America, Black people able to go places like the school I teach at Brown University. Most Ivy Leagues before Johnson, it was about 1% Black enrollment. By the middle of the 70s, you're looking at 7 to 10%. Hardly overwhelming. I mean, you're hardly talking about
But still better than one.
but it's better than one, right? Like, but people that act like, oh my God, those policies really benefited so many people. 7 to 10% from one. But it was because of that. What is happening now is Trump is following a similar playbook in reverse. So he's
Mm.
pulling money back out of higher education that would have benefited, and just the federal funding that's destabilizing schools in general. It's impacting financial aid. The neediest kids are the ones that are going to need financial aid.
Destruction of Department of Education, removal of Pell
Getting rid
Grants.
of DEI, which is often DEI. I mean, I didn't even like these terms really, but because it means so much in this moment, it means everything and nothing. To say DEI, you mean I don't even know. Like, it
Whatever
just
they
means
want, whatever they want it to mean,
whatever
the enemy.
whatever they want it to mean, but getting rid of any policies and programs that acknowledge that some Americans need, or just some students from wherever they're from need different kind of support than other students. Taking that out, what we understood from the 60s is because of the different trajectories around education from Brown v. Board, you battled to keep Black people out of high quality schools. You closed all of the schools that Black people attended, fired all the high quality teachers that taught Black kids. So in claiming a kind of end of oppression with Brown v. Board, you dismantled everything that allowed Black people in an educational sense to educate themselves. They then became dependent on this system that never educated them equally. Which is why I say integration failed Black kids, because the
Yeah.
way it was implemented, the way that it happened, not the idea of it, but integration works very well. It leads to all kinds of equalities. It's just there's been a battle against it that's so hard and so deeply rooted that it doesn't, in this moment, surprise me that we're watching this battle. be brought not just to public schools, K-12 schools who've been told get rid of DEI, get rid of supports if you want federal money, but now higher education was saying basically the same thing. Get rid of the things that will allow you to in any way take care of, advantage, welcome Black people.
And I hope that those who were centrists and said the rest of us were suffering from TDS or being alarmists, we shouldn't call them racist, that it's economic anxiety. I hope they can finally see with their own eyes. We've been saying it for, well, you've been saying it for years. I've been saying for a long time that this is a white supremacist agenda. They want to take us back to the 19th century. I was being nice to them. I said 1952, pre-Brown versus Board of Education. But some of these laws, they want to go back to the 1860s. And now they're praising Confederacy, the traitorous secessionist slavers, and renaming these forts and literally purging our history and our identities and our heroes from American textbooks. Folks, what more do you need to see? You saw everything 10 years ago. Very fine people on both sides. But we have Professor Rooks who's fighting the good fight. The book is called Integrated: How American Schools Failed Black Children, and I would say are continuing to fail Black children, and not just Black children, folks, all of our children, because white kids are also being failed right now with the attack on our public schools. Public schools, 90% of American kids go to public schools. So think about the future. Think about your kids. At the end of the day, I always say fascists come after everyone, including
Yes.
fellow fascists. White supremacy has always been dumb and self-destructive. With the final 30 seconds I have left, Professor Rooks, shamelessly promote yourself.
Well, I hope that people will really give a look, give a read to Integrated. Integrated is the story of the failure of the implementation of integration in the United States, but it's told through my family history.
Mm.
So it has a humane, a personal, hopefully a way in for people to care about it. In at the level of humanity. So it tells the story of my father, my grandparents who were teachers in the segregated South, my father who was destroyed by his first integration experience, my experience, and then my son's as a high achieving Black child in a prep school where he had to learn how to navigate people using the N word
Mm.
with him regularly. So I think it gives a good context for this moment. And I think that that context is really necessary. It's vitally necessary for those of us who care about not just democracy and citizenship, but fundamentally education.
Professor, I'm going to keep you for an extra second, and I want to ask you one last question before I let you go. Is so many people watch, so many people care, so many people now are realizing, so many people are now waking up, even though, as my co-host Danielle Moody of the Democracy-ish show says, they still hit snooze. But if some more people are saying, maybe I shouldn't hit snooze. I get asked this all the time. I say this frequently. I'm very lucky, privileged more than most, go on TV, speeches. I co-host the show with Democracy-ish, with Danielle Moody, The Left Hook. I get asked, I'm just an average person. What can I do? I'm a nobody. What can I do? And for those who are watching right now, especially those who care about our children and our education and don't want this country to retrench back to white supremacy, what can they do in this moment?
I think what you can do ranges from the hyper personal. Don't be afraid to talk with your children. If the issue is around education and you have children or young people in your life, nieces, nephews, friends, your friends' kids, don't be afraid to talk to them about what's happening today. Let me tell you, kids, young kids are picking up on, elementary school kids are picking up on there's something wrong, there's
Mm,
something going on. Talk with them. Just be brave and talk with them at a broader kind of way. What we all need to do is we're going to have to find community, not
mm,
the community that we happen to move into neighborhoods and live around, not the community that maybe people who raised us. We're going to have to find communities of the like-minded.
mm,
You can find them at your kid's school. You can find them in diners. When you talk to people and they too believe that there's something worth fighting for public education, that it's under threat, call that a community and try to bring them together. Because what's going to get us out of this is courage and community and organizing. There's nothing that's going to work at this point. We need the courage to do it. We need a community of people. We can't do this alone. And we have to organize. We have to have a strategy. We have to have ask. tasks. We have to know where we're going and what we want. So from just talk to the people in your house, let them confirm their sanity about what's going on, to think about how you can bring people together to try to work collaboratively on one issue. Pick one thing that you'd like to have change and do that. Don't try to change the whole world. That's just overwhelming and tiring. One thing.
And I'm a father. My wife and I, we talk to our kids, and I always tell people that empathy is a superpower, kindness is a
Mm,
superpower, a
mm,
parent modeling right behavior is a superpower.
yeah.
My children are age 10, 8, and 5. We sat there and talked to them about George Floyd. We sat there and talked to them
Yes.
about what's happening. We sat there and talked to them about immigrants. You sit there and talk to them about pronouns and LGBTQ.
Yes.
Kids are smart. They get it. They're empathetic. So the way you model your behavior and the way you raise your children and the
Yes.
way you show up in your local communities, that folks is fundamental and critical. And that's what we'll need is we'll need people to take care of their families, their kids, their communities all across America to protect their schools. Whenever people show up in the school boards, there's a small minority, but when the majority shows up, they shut them down, even in some red states and red counties. So everyone has a role to play and Professor Rooks is doing her job. She is a Brown University professor. She is the chair of the Department of Africana Studies. Her book, Integrated: How American Schools Failed Black Children, just came out 2 months ago. Please pick it up. I'm going to have a link. And to everyone else, please be kind, take care of yourselves, be empathetic, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Take care, everyone.